There we go. We went over the 4 lenses on Monday, which is the first part of the stealth sales process that we taught. It is actually sequentially generally the second part of a sales process. The first one being like an introduction, this is who I am, all that stuff. And so I'll put my slides here, drop in the chat. Let me know that you can see it. Somebody let me know.
Yep,
and
I can see.
Perfect. And if you've seen any of these, you know by now that the big assumption we're making is that every step you take in your business is getting you closer to something that matters to you. If you're one of those people that is in business just to be in business, probably not going to appreciate the stuff we teach nearly as much as somebody that wants more free time, wants to buy a house, has life goals they're trying to fund with their business. Because we are all about getting you there with as much certainty as possible. So Monday, we went over the stealth sales process part 1, which was the 4 lenses. 2 qualitative and 2 quantitative lenses. We'll have a replay available for you. I'll tell you how to get that. Those are the 4 lenses that we use to get people basically to sell themselves if they're a good fit now, right? So we went over how to identify if a prospect is a good fit now, a good fit later, or not a good fit. Really, really important part of the sales process, especially if, again, we're aiming for quality of life. We want good fits. We want them to pay us a lot. We want them to stick around forever. So that's what this process is designed for. Now, today, we're going to break down part 2, which has a few components. Dan may add a few extra as we go. We're going to break down the authentic story, which is ultimately the way I look at it. When I see Dan do it, this is what I think of. It's how to stand out in any industry. Really important if you're in an industry like coaches. Seems like everybody's a coach. Finance, CPAs. Dan will get into it, I'm sure. But there's a fundamental assumption we make when we go to our accountant. That is, oh my gosh, it's an accountant. It's going to be boring. So how do we stand out? I'm going to break that down. It works really, really well in the beginning of a sales call, which is how the context we're speaking about it today. It also makes a fantastic interview component of a podcast interview. So if you get introduced or you introduce yourself this way in a podcast, you immediately stand out. The same with video or any other kind of introduction, speaking on stage, anywhere you might be in a new audience. Making this the first touch will make you stand out, and it is compelling to people. And there's 3 parts that I have here. Dan may have more. There's your authentic story. There's a little bit about cognitive biases, and there's a component of what Dan calls playing your game. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna let Dan, assuming internet holds up, sounds like it's doing well, break down the authentic story, how you came to it, and really, really what it is and kind of the structure.
Yeah, so as a little bit of historical context, years back, I was in the Seattle Rotary, which at the time was the biggest Rotary in the world. And I would go to these different events, and I would sit down at the table and I would introduce myself and I'd say, oh yeah, I run an accounting firm. And almost universally, it was like I told them that I had the plague. It was like a screeching halt to the conversation. And I assumed that it was because they're like, got it, accountant, that sounds boring. You're going to talk to me about taxes or some other thing that stresses me out or I'm not interested in, and I'm here to network and meet other like interesting people. And so there was sort of this like screeching halt to conversation. And it's a large group. So every week you were basically at a table with new people. And so after several weeks of noticing the same things, like I got to figure out something different, some different approach, because I joined this whole Rotary thing, partly to like make a social impact, but also for business purposes, business development. So I got to do something different because there's sort of a screeching halt to every conversation. At the same time that that was going on, there's something called Beta Alpha Psi, which is this accounting fraternity at most colleges that have a business school and accounting program. And so this Beta Alpha Psi thing, I was a member. Nolan, my business partner, he was a member when we were in college. And we were invited in to speak. And basically every single time we had kind of the same reaction, whether it was at the college that we went to or any other university that we would come and speak at, which is that they would introduce us and they'd say nth degree CPAs, and it's a regional firm. And immediately the questions that we started getting from the attendees would be these very stereotypical questions that you would ask a small firm. And so we were getting kind of bucketed into like, okay, got it, small firm, you guys must like lack resources, probably training's gonna suck, and so on and so forth. So there are all these sort of stereotypes that and assumptions that the students would make. So kind of two experiences happening at the same time, one in a networking framework, another in a college setting where we're trying to recruit, where quickly we're being bucketed in a way that was not favorable based off the outcomes that we wanted. So had to figure out basically a better way. How can I hit the reset button on the way that people are anchored, frankly, towards who we are? We make these really, really snap judgments because of fight or flight and all the neuroscience. We make these snap judgments about who someone is and what they represent. So how do I overcome that? And it starts with basically doing a hard reset of your bio. And this is basically the authentic story framework that I came up with, which is most people, when they give their bio, they go something like this. Hi, my name is Dan. I went to Seattle University. I got a degree in accounting and e-commerce information systems, graduated summa cum laude. Then I did a fellowship at the Governmental Accounting Standards Board and helped write an accounting standard on derivatives. And then I moved on to work at Deloitte, where I primarily worked on auditing Microsoft's treasury function, which managed about $100 billion at the time. And then I went to a Warren Buffett-backed company. And then I worked for the CFO, and now CFO of Roku. And then I worked in tax. And oh, by the way, I like to spend time with my kids. And I like the Seahawks. It's like they throw up all of these stats. And all the things I just shared about you were true statements about myself. They're all facts. But it's pretty boring. And no one cares, frankly. No one cares. It's like when the bio part starts, everyone just shuts down. I think it's equivalent to when the wait staff at a restaurant comes over and they just start telling you the specials for the day. And you're like, every once in a while you're interested in the specials, but they don't really ask you, hey, do you want to hear about the specials? Sometimes they do, but often they just get into it. And it's so much detail. And at the end, you're like, I'm just looking at my menu. What did they say? And maybe they said halibut, and your like ears perked up for a moment. And you're like, oh, okay, halibut. I'm interested in halibut tonight. I want to hear about that special. But I think it's very similar with a bio where there's all this detail. People already know it's going to be a bunch of facts. They don't really care. They're like, let's just get into it. So with that in mind, what I've started doing is a hard reset. So if I'm going to be a speaker in front of, and I've done this at those Beta Alpha Psi events, I've done it at the CFO conferences that I've spoke at. When I spoke at CarrotCon, I did the same thing. In fact, often when people would give my bio, they don't know what some of the stuff, like the detailed bio, like this happened at CarrotCon, where they just started making jokes about it. where they're like, oh, Dan's been 40 under 40 globally 3 times. That sounds like a fake award. So start making sort of light of it because they just don't know what it is. So what I do is I'll come out on stage or in a podcast format, and I'll just give that boring bio. And I'll look out and I'll pause and I'll go, what do you guys think? And there's a bunch of shrugs and like, what do you think about my bio? People are like, oh, yeah, it's pretty cool. Good job. Placating, of course. And then I go, it's pretty boring. I'm going to guess most of you stopped listening. Like, pretty boring bio, pretty standard, gave you a bunch of facts. I'm going to guess most of you weren't listening because, here comes another bio and who cares? Like, you just want to get to the content anyways. And people start nodding their heads like, yeah, I wasn't really listening. It was boring. A bunch of facts. I didn't know what most of those facts represented, so I tuned out. So I'm just attacking the gotcha moment. So always want to attack the gotcha moment. What are the things that people are thinking that that if you acknowledge it, you're going to immediately build a lot of trust with them because you understand what how they're thinking. So attack the gotcha moments. And then I go, okay, well, this is a safe space. Why don't we close our eyes, take a couple deep breaths, let's just reset. Because I'm the accountant talking, and this is probably stressful for you. Again, attacking the gotcha moment. And then I'll go, if it's okay with you guys, can I give it another shot? And everyone goes, yeah. And then what I do is I go, cool. All right. Well, if you can imagine the cliche kid growing up scheming on business ideas, that was me as a kid. And my parents got to try to rein me in. And then I went off to business school and got a degree in accounting and information systems because I thought the combination of those 2 degrees would be a good starting point for it to be an entrepreneur. And then I start to get into the details of the story behind how I went in the opposite direction and did this fellowship and worked at all these places. But frankly, I was miserable along the way. And then finally, I realized, hey, I'm pretty good at this accounting, finance, tax thing. I think there's an opportunity to do something different in the CPA space. And so that was the basis for starting my firm. So I'll go through that and then I'll go, what do you guys think? At that point, everybody was listening. The reaction, people are sitting up more in their chairs. And they're like, that was way better. Like, okay, what about it was better? It's like, well, you told some stories and I could relate to you. And so the intention there is, what is it that I really want people to know about me, to think about me? And what I want them to think about me is that I'm not an accountant. I happen to know about accounting. But what I want them to think about me is that I'm an entrepreneur and I'm like you, my potential client, that I'm an entrepreneur, that I struggled. It took me a while to figure out what I wanted to do. I had some dynamic tension along the way. And then ultimately, now I'm running this business, this accounting firm. And yes, I do accounting, but ultimately I'm an entrepreneur. And so the process is to basically figure out what it is that you want people to think about you. What is it? The ultimate message. In my case, I want them to think about me as an entrepreneur, not as an accountant, and that I'm going through things that are similar to what other entrepreneurs are going through. And so I may have the subversive element to that is like, I may have, I'm like you, and there's some elements of like I can relate to you, and I'm a person, not just an accountant. So let's stop there for a second and see, Nick, if anything you want to add to that.
Yeah, and I think it's really important because we actually walked a few accounting firms through this, and it's more difficult. It's more difficult than it seems. If we don't, and we actually have worksheets and stuff that'll be able to share. We have a tendency, if we always talk about diffusion of innovation and early adopters and technicians and all that stuff. we have a tendency to get into the technical stuff that, we want to leave an impression that we know what we're talking about. The very reason oftentimes somebody comes to you is they don't have the same skill set as you. And we fall into this sharing our credentials and stuff that might be meaningful. In this case, for Dan, I've worked with a lot of fitness people. I've worked with a lot of physicians and doctors. And sometimes in our sales pitch and our introduction, we speak in a way to impress other doctors or other accountants or other fitness people. And that's what we're trying to actively retrain ourselves to speak in a way that our prospect is compelled, and I don't want to say impressed, but to compel our prospect, not our competitors. Every time I listen to a technician open up with this kind of introduction, they're speaking in a way to impress the other technicians, which are exactly the people that, one, you can't really help because they have the same skill set as you, and two, they're not going to buy anything from you because they have the same skill set as you.
Yeah.
So
what it does is it shatters some of those beliefs that they have, or they're expecting you to talk a certain way. They're expecting you to just get right into all of the features of what you do and not necessarily the benefits. You're getting into in CPAs, and I've at one point interviewed a bunch of insurance providers for business insurance providers for clients, and everyone said the exact same thing, which is, super accessible. You can text me. We're always going to try and find the cheapest rates. It's all the stuff that they think they're saying is unique, but it's what all their competitors are saying as well. And what I think for a relationship, if you're in a business where you're going to have a real relationship with your clients, they want to know if you can solve the problem, but they also want to know if you're someone that they were going to actually enjoy working with, and that you're going to be able to relate to them, especially if you're going to be sharing really personal things like we do as CPAs, what you do with a coach, with most consultants, just about every consultant, there's something they have to admit to you that they have not been doing. Fitness, same thing. They're sharing and admitting things that maybe they're ashamed about. And so what we're trying to do is say, like, I'm a normal human being as well, and I can relate to you in these areas, and not to kind of just inundate you with your facts from your bio. Because doing that is somewhat trying to check the box on competency, which I get, but you can do that through story in a way that connects back to the perception that you want people to have of you. So in a podcast or especially in public speaking scenarios, I'll do that hard reset in the beginning. Often I'll say, like, please don't do the introduction for me. I'd like to do it. I'd like to read my own bio just so I can do that reset. In the sales process, you don't have the time to do that. So I'm setting up, hey, I'd love to hear more about you, why you reached out, how we could best help you. And then, of course, I can tell you more about me and how we work, and then we can figure out if it makes sense to proceed. And then at some point when the timing is right to tell them more about me, then I'll get into, like, if you can imagine that cliche kid. So I'll just go right into it. I won't try to do the reset to a degree. There's not the time. Plus, we've built a little bit of rapport leading up to that. So that's how we sort of frame it. But the key thing, because when I've taught this, like, on a one-on-one basis, and I have people go and write their authentic story, they come back with stories that are more personal, but not necessarily relevant to what they want their client to think about them. So when we did this with 9 other firms, I think everyone followed the framework of, if you can imagine that cliche kid growing up, and then the thing that they inserted after that was different. But some of them were really, really personal things, but it didn't connect the dots back to the takeaway. Like, what is the essence of what you want people to know? The essence of what I want people to think about me is that I'm an entrepreneurial accountant. Like, I'm thinking about the things beyond just the numbers, and I'm forward thinking rather than thinking about the past. So the imagine part, the thing that comes after it, whatever that is, has to convey the overarching story that you're trying to re-anchor your prospects to. So if it's something vulnerable, that's great, but it's not moving the needle towards, I want them to think I'm an entrepreneurial accountant. I want them to think I'm have a really scientific approach. I want them to think I'm an intellectual. I want them to think that I'm very empathetic and compassionate. Like, what are the things that you really want them to be re-anchored towards? So whatever you follow that, if you can imagine with, has to be incredibly intentional, and then everything that comes after that connects back to that imagine piece. And when you say if you can imagine, most people then imagine. So they're seeing in their brain like, oh yeah, to a degree, I can't imagine that. Yeah. Probably thinking of like a kid at a lemonade stand.
And we want them, we really want them to do that, because this is, again, we worked with other firms and walked them through. There's a lot of people just want to say, hey, I'm an entrepreneurial accountant. Or for me, my whole story is based, I just want people to believe that I can figure things out. Like, I'm the kind of person that can figure things out. And when I say, if I was to say, hey, look, I'm really good at figuring things out, well, everybody else says that too. Dan already alluded to that. So when we say, hey, can you imagine, and we tell the story, it is just, one is a little bit of proof, two, it's more entertaining. But it's proof, and they kind of come to the conclusion like, oh, you're entrepreneurial like me, or, oh, you can really figure things out. And part of the stealth sales is obviously we believe the conclusions that we came up with on our own, far more so than the ones we were told to believe. So it's useful to write down what do I want people to know about me, and then what stories can I tell about my past or my history, or examples that will lead them to this conclusion without me necessarily having to say it. So part of this training, we did build a training around this, and I think it's a really good training, was first write your bio, right? Just your boring bio. And then there's a series of videos on cognitive biases. And Dan, I want to talk about how, one, why this is there, and two, how we can use these tools to improve this part of the process, the authentic story.
Yeah, I think we shared those 10 cognitive distortions.
Yep.
Part of the training. So I don't know if we'll make this available as a resource from this training, or it may already be up in the Wealth Q&A website. But there's these 10 cognitive biases, for example, or cognitive distortions, and they're things that create anxiety. So things like should statements. I should do this, I should do that. Other examples would be all or nothing thinking. So it's either good or it's bad. Either everyone's gonna love me, or everyone's gonna hate me. And so there's several other examples, well, 10 total. And what I have tried to train myself over the years, and I worked with a PhD who specializes in anxiety to help me kind of work through moments where I was experiencing anxiety and that it was impacting my performance, whether that's just day to day on client calls, or that's being on a stage speaking, or trying to do something new, is to try to identify what are the cognitive distortions that I'm prone to. So there's 10 of them, but most of us have a 2 to 3 that are our default, and they So mine, for example, the primary one is should statements. And the differentiation that was helpful for me is this idea that depression is thinking and having negative feelings about the past, and anxiety is about having negative feelings about the future. So that differentiation was important for me to understand, that when I'm participating in these should statements, I'm creating these negative feelings about the future. And I'm sort of, to a degree, creating suffering for myself. And so the idea behind these understanding these cognitive biases is that in order to effectively create our authentic story, we have to be in a neutral position where we're not being biased by what we want other people to, all of the negative thoughts and all of the things that everyone we think is saying about us, and all the dopamine and serotonin hits from social media. It's like we have to find ourselves in a relatively neutral position to be able to really think about our authentic story and what it is that we want people to sort of take away from our interactions. So we have this broader process of figuring out your game. What is your style in business? And that requires like removing all of the things you were told you were supposed to be doing and getting to the essence of what it is that you want to be doing.
Which leads right into exactly what you said. And this is really, really important. So anybody that's saying, hey, where's the tactics? You're going to want to, this is like one of the underpinnings of everything we do, which is playing your game. And you can see, I'll tease a little bit. There's two worksheets that, and I'll show you how to get access to them near the end of this call. But this is one of the most valuable tools that you could use in your business development process in general, but especially this sales process. So, Dan, you want to break down the idea of playing your game and give us some action steps on how to figure out what our game is?
Yeah, so I work with a coach named Randy Massengale, and I think he's episode 2 of my podcast, Rigging the Game, and he was on our Seeking Certainty calls back when COVID started. So he's been a long-term mentor of mine. And before I started working with him, I found him through some close friends of mine, and that I had reached out and said, I think I need a coach. And they said, okay, well, you should talk to Randy, but just as a heads up, he's super unconventional. So I can't really describe you. I can't describe him to you and his methods because he doesn't conform to one singular method or approach. So you're just going to have to meet him, which was totally threading the needle on like exactly what I want to hear as someone who also wants to be considered a non-conventional what I do. So meet with Randy, and he asked me about an hour worth of just sort of continuous questions. And a good part of them were focused on my ideal sport or hobby growing up. And so specifically around, in my case, was basketball. And so he was asking me a lot of questions about the sport, my style of play. And ultimately at the end, what he came back to was that if you look at your ideal sport or hobby growing up, ignoring certain kind of socioeconomic conditions, i.e. like you're not able to play the sport you want to, or you've got kind of overbearing parents who don't allow you to play the way that you want. Often as a kid, it's sort of almost your freest expression of who you are. Like you're choosing how you're going to show up. And so he kind of uses that as an analog for figuring out what your style play is in business. And it was sort of mind blowing for me to kind of go back and think about, okay, my ideal sport is basketball. I want to take the last shot. I'm not the most athletically gifted person. So I've got to kind of rely on hustle, and to realize that there were some trends in the way that I am as a business owner and CEO that mapped back to the way that I played the game of basketball, and realizing that when I'm the most effective as a business owner and entrepreneur is when I'm playing my game, when I'm leaning into those tendencies that are very similar to the way that I would play basketball. And so that's when I'm like the closest to my zone of genius, if you will. And when I'm not playing that style, when I'm trying to play somebody else's game, that's when I start making mistakes. And that's when I'm just not happy, or as happy in the day to day. And so the idea is to think about your style. What is your style in business? Because that largely might inform your authentic story. And so it's a nice, I think, hack to kind of quickly figure out what your style is. Sorry, my kids are here at the new office and making some noise in the background. Talking about profit priorities. One of those is having time with my kids and being able to take them with me from time to time. The downside is sometimes they make a little bit of background noise. But back to playing your game, that sort of exercise of thinking back to your favorite sport or hobby. What is it? What was your style of play? Were you hustle? Were you, what was it? And then trying to think about, in terms of your chosen profession, and think about when you are the most effective, how similar is it to the way that you would play your ideal sport?
Yeah, and in this, you can get super granular. I like to, in the sales process in particular. I've changed a lot of people's sales processes after kind of understanding this about them. Is your sales process aligned with your style of play? Especially if you're doing the sales. Those are the questions. So this is kind of what it looks like. I want to give you guys something super actionable. This is top secret training. I think I saw Tina on here, so she's seen it before. A few others may have seen it. But here's a process. You want to stand out and nail these sales calls to give yourself a huge advantage going in. Write your boring bio. Write it the way that you would typically write it. Tina says, yes, I still use my story too. Yep. Once you get in the groove, it's a really powerful tool. There's a video series on cognitive biases as well as cognitive distortions, right? You can go to Khan Academy and watch these videos. It's 32 minutes total. I think do you know what it's called? Just cognitive biases.
Yeah. If you Google Khan Academy and mental accounting bias, it will take you into this series of, I think, five videos on various biases.
Cool. So I'm going to walk them through some of this stuff real quick. So watch these videos, and then there's playing your game worksheets, and I'll share them with you guys real quick. I want to make sure we don't run out of time. This will amplify all of your marketing, all of your sales, and the way that you choose to build your business. So playing your game worksheet, number one is just, what was your favorite sport or hobby growing up? Not the one you played most, not even necessarily the one you were best at, but the one where you would just play it all day long. Which one was the most aligned? Which one would you play? Given the choice to do anything, what is that sport? What is that hobby? Some people just have hobbies. It could be knitting. But we really just want to know, or you want to know, where are you in flow? Because we want to build everything to be aligned with that. And then what did you enjoy about it? So I'll give you an example for me. The sport I was best at was football. And I played all the way through my freshman year in college. But I was in the most flow as either wrestling or when I went pro in strongman. And what I like is that it was all about energy conservation. And you'll see my business is built this way. If Jeff is still on here, he'll tell you. Dan knows too. I just chill and I look for the one opportunity to make one move to win the game, to win the match. That's my style. I'm different than Dan in the sense that Dan likes to dive around the court and, super high effort all the time. I am much more calculated. I'm much more conserve energy. But then once there's an opening, I'm going to put every ounce of energy I have into just winning right there. So my business has to be, my sales process is built that way. My business is built that way. So think about, what about it did you enjoy? And then I kind of covered this. What style of play? Did you prepare? Did you wing it? Were you all out effort, or were you super calculated? Do you conserve your energy? Do you like music on in the background? Do you like silence? Like, these are all the things that we really want to know about ourselves to be phenomenal influencers. I don't mean like social media influencer. I mean to influence people to do things that are beneficial to them, which is what sales is supposed to be. Right. So that's worksheet number 1. Write those down and go through this process and do the work. Okay. Number 2, this is just referring back to number 1 and saying, do you operate in congruence with the way you played your favorite sport or hobby? Most people don't, because they were told to hustle and grind when they're not hustle and grinders, or they were told to manage people and play as a team, when in their best sport they're just one-on-one. They work best when they control the whole situation. So is your sales process built in congruence with the way you played your favorite sport or hobby? If yes, how so? If not, why? Right? So work through these. They just refer back to, how can you operate more in congruence with the way you played your favorite sport or hobby? So as I sell, I do Jeff will tell you this too. Jeff's my partner in my private client group. I sell the same way that I would do strongman or wrestle. I could serve my energy. I don't try to convince anybody of anything. And once the opening is there, I do the job. I don't try to force an opening. I don't flop around. That's just not my style. And if I try to build my sales process with that disposition in mind, I'm not going to do very well. I'll never be in flow. It'll always be uncomfortable. Okay. And then why would you resist operating more in congruence? And the answer is often because somebody else told you to do it a different way. But that somebody else probably has a different style of game than you do. So it may work for them and it will not work for you. Okay, so that's why it's so important to understand, play your game. So you write your bio, you watch a video on cognitive biases, you understand the 10 cognitive distortions, right? And then as you write out, you're playing your game worksheets and you rewrite your bio, you're going to have these biases in mind. But then you rewrite your bio as an authentic story. So here's Dan's original bio. That's the really impressive but boring one. And then this is what it looks like rewritten after, which he already shared, after going through this practice. And I would go through this exercise as often as possible and practice presenting this authentic story as often as possible. Right, hopefully that makes sense. Now, typically, we'll roll right into the main thing here. Typically, this is where we try to bribe you to join our Diamond membership. We usually use these flywheels to deliver a ton of value and hope that people want a higher level. They want to talk to us one-on-one and all that stuff. But today, July 3rd, we're celebrating financial independence because 4th of July, Independence Day, all that fun stuff. Financial independence, which means up until Monday or Tuesday, if Dan is at the mic right now, then he can confirm. Up until Monday or Tuesday, we are allowing lifetime access to the Certainty app and the future updates of this version for $97. So cfeclass.com/certainty to get lifetime access. It's a massive, massive, massive discount, but we want to get people onto the app and using it because it's really, really powerful. And if you do that by Monday, then either on Monday or Tuesday, I will give you access to some of my stuff and some of Dan's stuff, Stealth Content Mastery course. It's 5 videos. We just talked about the sales process. This is all the same kind of concepts baked into your marketing to get people onto that sales conversation in the first place. And I'll throw that in if you get lifetime access to the Certainty app, cfeclass.com/certainty. Also throw in both replays of the stealth sales process. So 4 lenses from Monday, authentic story from today. Give you this video module, which is playing your game with both worksheets and your authentic story worksheet. So your own copy of that, your own copy of that, your own copy of that. You can obviously just write them down really quick if you'd like. That's fine too. Let me go back here. So $97, cfeclass.com/certainty, lifetime access. I see a comment that says, is the app out yet? Dan replied, yes. We just have to give people access manually. So we got to work through that process, make sure nothing breaks. Jeff Moore says it is worth it at 5 times the price. Absolutely. It is pretty much Dan's life work, intellectual property into one place. Mutita says excited with lots of D's at the end. Excited. So cfeclass.com/certainty, $97 lifetime access. You will get access to the app and all of the bonuses by end of day Monday. I really want to tell you it'll be end of day today or this weekend, but we'll set a low bar and exceed it if possible. Access by end of day Monday, cfeclass.com/certainty. Jump on there, get the bonuses. Nobody has, I've given it away to some high-end members. The content mastery class is not for sale. It may never be for sale. Same with the stealth sales, the 2 videos we just did. Not sure what we're going to do with them yet. So cfeclass.com/certainty. Dan, do you have anything to add? Attendees, do you have any questions?
With respect to the app, everyone who's already purchased it, I'm adding users over the weekend, so everyone should get a email login from questions@certaintyapp.com over the weekend and or by Monday. So all the initial bugs and kinks are worked out. User management was a challenge to get set up, but we're finally ready to start adding users, and I've added some already and confirmed that they can get in. So we're live to start adding users. So super excited about it. What version 1 does is it allows you to log in your assets, liabilities, and put in your priorities. So basically, what's the point of why you have a business, or what are you aspiring towards? Is it 10 more hours per week? Is it funding your retirement? Is it buying a home? What are those things in order? Because we have to optimize, not maximize. So what is the number 1 priority, number 2, number 3, etc. And then what it does for you is ultimately based off your current assets and your current liabilities, and it tells you whether or not you have enough cash to be able to fund all the priorities based off the target dates. So maybe priority 1 you want to do in 2 years, priority 2 you want to do in 7 years, and priority 3 you want to do in 20 years, just making up examples. Based off your current assets and the rate of return on those assets and your current cash flow, will you be able to hit all those targets? And if not, how much additional cash do you need to earn each year to make that happen? Which, in my opinion, is maybe the single most important thing that you need to know, which is how much more do I actually need to make to realize all of my priorities? No one is telling you that number, an actual number, like the number based off your current assets and your current business. There's an assumption that you need to have a $10 million or $100 million business. There's an assumption, but what if you could actually have the exact number? Because once you've locked in that number, then your job is to reduce your risk. Let's make sure that that money is certain that it's going to come in, because if it does, I'm going to realize all of my goals. And then what you can do is go, you know what, I have new goals, new priorities, or the timelines I want to change. I don't want to achieve priority 1 in 2 years. I want to achieve it in 6 months. And what it's going to do is update and tell you within seconds what that cash needs to be. So you can calculate, to the penny, basically, how much you actually need to earn to make all that happen. So that's version 1, or actually what I'm calling version 0. We've got a lot of features that are coming. If I showed you the diagram, it's kind of overwhelming of all the stuff that's going to go into it. But ultimately, it's going to be a tool that integrates all the stuff we've been teaching, all the financial readiness and tracking your bank accounts to tell you how much you need to have in your reserves, and all the stuff that we teach as part of Profit Flywheel are going to be built out over the next year or so. So super excited, looking forward to getting people on. Any things features that you want to see added, would love to hear those. Any bugs or anything that you uncover, want to hear about those too. Hopefully we've worked out them all, but inevitably as we add users, we'll have stuff pop up.
Absolutely. Let me look. Questions some people are asking, just making sure that I have this or have access to this. What I will do right now, I'm looking for specific names. I will send an email right now while we're sitting here. Megan, you're on the list. Tina, you are on the list. You've already paid. I'll send I will just let me know. Let me know if you're not sure. What I will do is I will send a confirmation email within the next 24 hours, just letting you know that, hey, you're on the list, so that you don't have to go pay for it twice or deal with all that. Yep. Yeah, Kyle, I answered your question there. If anybody wants access to anything, or you're not sure, you go to cfeclass.com/login, and anything packaged up is sitting right there. Anything that is not packaged up is not there yet. So you can always go there if you're wondering, hey, do I have access to something? It'll show you access levels. So I'm not logged in, so this is all locked for me. But if I logged in, it would unlock everything, and it'll be a little green open lock here. Cool. So that's any other questions, or we can wrap up a couple minutes early and start working on getting access to the Certainty app. Hopefully you get access, you play. What I'm going to ask you to do to get your bonuses, I may ask you to actually log in and enter your profit priorities and stuff. Just start using the app. But I'll give you all the details and make sure you know how to get everything that we just talked about.
Cool.
Anything? Yep. All right. We'll give it one more minute for any more Q&A in the chat, and then we'll get out of here.
Nice. While we wait, I got my camera back on. You're soon to be office right now. This is what's happening to it next. So since you've delayed moving to Seattle, there's these lovely ladies are adding sparkles and unicorns and perler beads. So the longer you wait, the more bedazzled your space will be.
That's just going to make me want to put it off longer. I'm going to have the prettiest office space in the whole internet marketing land.
That's right. Then over here, this will be the studio. So we're building a studio in this space over here. So future videos and stuff.
This is not a studio.
Noella says, never mind, this will not be a studio. So,
This is not a house.
This is our house.
All right. Well, that's fine. We don't need videos. Awesome. Zach,
They're objecting.
I understand. I saw Zach on here, and then I said his name, and he left. So I was gonna check in on him. Anybody else needs anything? Questions at Wealth Q&A, and then the login email comes from at Certainty app, correct? Dan, hello.
Sorry, what was that?
The login will come from at Certainty app.
At Certainty app. Yep.
Perfect. Then keep an eye out for that, and we will see you guys. If nothing else, then we'll see you on Monday for Profit Flywheel on Monday.
Cool. I hope everyone enjoyed the series. We spent a ton of time in research and thinking about the 4 lenses and just the sales process and how to play our game. And I hope people actually use it, because it's been a total game changer for me, and I think has resulted in most of my business successes and sales over the years, kind of leaning into my game.
Yep, I consider it a force multiplier. It's one of those things that 4 lenses and Authentic Story both. If you practice them, everything improves. Decision making, sales process, fulfillment process, the way you hire, the way you vet, all that stuff. So I consider it a force multiplier in that sense. So
For sure.
hopefully you do it, and we'll see you Monday.
Cool. All right. Thanks, everyone.